Hey guys, and welcome to another video. So a few of you asked me to do my video on my third work experience placement. I wasn't sure whether to make it or not because I'd already done one on a previous work experience placement, but since you requested it, I thought why not? So my third one was in a hospital and it was in the nutrition and dietetics department. Now, I remember when I got the email back saying that that was the department I was given, and I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't too happy because I remember for the application that you had to send off to the hospital, I think the three departments that I kind of said that I'd prefer to get was something like pediatrics, gynecology, and geriatrics, which is working with elderly people. And I remember when I got nutrition and dietetics, I was a bit like, this isn't quite what I asked for. It's not really near at all to what I asked for. And when I was telling people, they're like, really? Oh, okay, have fun. And so I'm not gonna lie, I was a bit like, should I go? I've already got my two placements, one being in India in a hospital and one being in a hospital here. Do I need my third? I've got more than enough to talk about. So I was really hesitant, but I was like, you know what, I might as well. And I already said that I would, so I should. And honestly, it was probably the best placement out of all three. It was definitely the most fun, the most informative, and probably the most varied, which is something definitely out of all of those three kind of things you want to be getting out from a work experience. And so yeah, definitely worth going to. So I'm kind of just going to do a similar format to what I did in the previous video. I'm just going to kind of sort of briefly go through what I did each day and just how it was. And so the hospital, I think a plus point was that the hospital was much closer to me than the second one. The second one, I would wake up at 6 o'clock to get there. It would take an hour and a half. This one, it was a 40-minute bus journey, so a little bit better. So the first day we went, and there were 30 other people also on work experience compared to the second one where it was just me. So the first bit, the half of the day was pretty much just an introduction to the hospital, and then they gave out a bunch of different leaflets and things with health and safety, all of that kind of stuff, so it was a little bit boring. But then what I found really fun, and this happened every Monday and Tuesday, is there was a lunch club, and this is basically something that they're trialling out in the hospital that I was with the nutrition and dietetics department. So it was really exciting because this is kind of a scheme and a project that only this department had decided to do, and they're just trialing it, in which they get a few stroke patients, and rather than them just having their lunch in the ward by their bedside, just eating day in, day out, and being quite mundane and boring, what they decided to do is take a few which they felt were able to. They took them off to the canteen where they could have a nice warm meal and be able to talk to each other and socialise and all of this. And it was really great, and this happens every Monday and Tuesday. And so every Monday, Tuesday, when it came to lunchtime, we would wheel them off, in wheelchairs all the way to the canteen, get their meals and just talk with them. And it was such a nice thing to do. I know it's not necessarily the most medical thing to do or anything like that. It wasn't particularly that kind of wasn't to do with the medication they were on or some kind of treatment. None of that. It was simply about making the patient stay there so much nicer and so much better. And that's a part of medicine that I really enjoy, just general patient contact. And you could see how much they enjoyed it. And these were some of the patients were really elderly and quite frail. And you could just see how happy they were just to be out of their normal environment and being able to chill and talk to each other and have a nice warm meal. And so that's something I really enjoyed, and that was every Monday and Tuesday. I think Monday morning, it was pretty much the introduction to the hospital. Then I went off with the lunch club, and then I came back, and I think I just did some admin for the day. I think I was getting out patient cards and sorting it out for new clinics later on. So it was a pretty good day. Second day, I think similar to that as well, we had lunch club. Also, like I did last time, I got all my notes down. Definitely recommend you to do this no matter what experience, what work experience you're on. It's really helpful, so later on when you are writing your personal statement or for interviews, you can look back and you have lots and lots of good details. Oh yeah, also on the Monday, it was really great. One of the guys in the nutrition dietetics department, he was giving sort of a talk on an older people awareness course, and it was mainly to different nurses, and that was really interesting. It was about sort of how the food should be prepared. It was that kind of thing. And it was talking about sort of different measurements that they used, and like they have a thing called MUST, which is like to do with the kind of, and it's all about trying to prevent malnutrition in a hospital, and so that was really interesting just to see that happen. Day 2 was probably not that exciting. It was a lot more like admin, writing up some letters. Then we had the lunch club again. Then there was just some filing, and then there was some stock checking, which was quite cool because it was nutrition and dietetics. A lot of the time they are kind of saying like giving supplements to their patients, whether the patient is elderly and in the 80s and 90s, or all the way down to your little babies and toddlers. They give different kind of supplements depending on their situation. So they had like this massive stock room full of all these kind of like different like yogurts and like shakes and all this kind of stuff. And so they would always have to do like a stock check to see, you know, what the numbers are at, do they need to order more, all of that kind of stuff. A little bit boring, but definitely really important. Day 3 was something that was really interesting. So this was the Wednesday. There was the Gestational Clinic. And for those of you who don't know what gestational is, don't worry, I had no idea before. It basically is a clinic for women who develop diabetes when they're pregnant. And so that's such a specific side, nutrition dietetics, but it was so interesting. I got to watch how a dietitian and a midwife who specialises in gestational diabetes kind of just spoke to about maybe 10 pregnant ladies about how they need to be regulating their diet, like just checking on it, and you know, checking on their sugar levels and all of this kind of stuff. And it was very much like a real life scenario, and it was just really interesting to sit and watch it all happen. And yeah, it was really, really good. They demonstrated how to use the different devices, all of that kind of stuff. What else did I do? I think that was it for that day. Oh yeah, also in the evening I got to go on some ward rounds, which is really great. I love ward rounds. They're so much fun. You just find a lot about each individual patient's case and all of the different things. It's really interesting. And so I went around with one of the people who worked there, and we went to, I can't remember which ward it was, but it was because the nutrition dietetics, as dietitians, they don't have their own ward. Instead they go off to patients in the stroke ward and this ward and that ward and kind of act like that, if they make sense. And so they had to look at the A, B, C, D, E of a patient, which is a whole bunch of different factors to do with them. And that was really interesting, this one case with this one patient who had really bad liver disease, and it was sort of about how they treat it, what kind of supplements do they need to give, do they need to monitor his diet, and all of this. It's really interesting. The Thursday, probably my favourite, because I got to shadow the Pediatrics clinic, and obviously that's what I want to be doing when I'm older, becoming a paediatrician. And so in the morning I got to watch the Pediatric clinic for babies and toddlers, and this was so much fun. You had all these small children come in, and often perhaps they were born premature, or they're just quite fussy, if you like, when they're eating. Various different things. Obviously you have all these parents who are really concerned, help, my child's not putting on enough weight. And so the dietitian would talk to them, look at their diet, look at, what, a food diary perhaps, see what they're kind of eating, and give the parents some advice and maybe some supplements, all this kind of thing. It was, once again, really interesting. You had all these different patients come in, different issues, and it was just really nice to watch and shadow how the dietitian was dealing with all of that. And then it was lunchtime, and then in the afternoon I got to shadow the Pediatrics clinic for teenagers and the older children. Once again, really interesting. You had cases where children were perhaps too short or too slim or skinny for their age, and so they were underweight, their BMI wasn't correct, all of this. And then you had children who were overweight, and so they needed to try and prevent them from any weight gain. And so it was those two kind of areas, but it was similar. It was really interesting. With some people, they're oh, make sure they eat loads of things, they need to fortify their food, all of this. The other people, make sure they exercise loads and all this kind of stuff. So that was really interesting. You had these two kind of scenarios. Once again, super interesting and really, really great. And yeah, I really loved seeing the individual cases again. Is that everything for Thursday? And then I basically wrote a bunch on each individual kind of patient and their situation, and they had to look at their food diaries, all of that kind of stuff. And then the Fridays, I can't remember what Fridays is, but basically Friday I was helping out, I did lots of admin that day, and since it was my last day, it was quite relaxed. I baked them a cake, they loved the cake. It's probably the best cake I've ever baked, which made me so happy. And yeah, once again, loads of admin. Oh, and then I had to like do phone calls, and this is like, I know that doesn't seem like a massive thing, but it's quite scary calling someone up and being like, hi, I just want to check that you're okay for your appointment on this day and this. And so at first I was really scared. I was like, what happens if I don't pronounce their name right, or if I say it wrong, or just I stumble and I'm like, oh, sorry, like, that's really unprofessional. But then after a few phone calls, I was like on it and I was like, hi there, it was just really cool. And yeah, that was pretty much my work experience. The people there were so, so lovely. It seemed like such a nice department. Some places, you know, you kind of feel like that tension, awkwardness between some of the colleagues. Everyone was so nice and friendly. They were all really helpful. And I spoke to loads of them, you know, they're asking me, what do you want to do? All of this kind of stuff. And I know that nutrition and dietetics is different to medicine, but it's still within the NHS and the healthcare system. And so once again, seeing how all of that's run, how they talk to their patients, and you know, all of that, it was just really, really great, and probably the best work experience I went on. I suppose, do I have any tips for you? Probably not as many as I did for, like, if you want more kind of thorough breakdown of like hospitals in general, I would advise you to watch my other work experience video. In terms of any tips, I suppose, one, ask questions when you want to. If you don't understand something, ask them. Obviously, if they're very busy, don't. But if they're not busy and you feel like, you know, you're comfortable, ask them. Ask if you're confused. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to explain something. Number two, as I said, write down your notes. I would say preferably on paper than on like a phone, because it can be a bit like, oh, why is she on her phone? So definitely write it on paper. And just be really enthusiastic, be excited, be interested. Search things up perhaps like the night before you go into work experience, get a bit of an idea of what you're going into. And yeah, that's pretty much everything from me. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Please do comment down below what you would like to see. Do you want more things on medicine, more things on me talking about my UCAS, all of that kind of stuff? Do tell me. Don't forget I have my own channel, which is Bit of a Fangirl, where I make lots of random little videos. And go check out my Instagram, which is Bit of a Fangirl, and my Twitter, which is @_ManishaP. And go subscribe to the Student Room for lots more cool content pretty much every single week. So yeah, I love you guys so, so very much, and I shall see you sometime soon. Bye!